Hello. Welcome to the Penn World Voices Festival event on nationalism. Don't worry, other people are coming. I'm just here to introduce our panelists who can tell us very much it can happen here because it happened where they were from. I'm going to introduce them now, and then they're going to come out, and we're going to have a conversation about nationalism and its follies in the context of the former Yugoslavia, but also in the countries where each one of these panelists and writers have moved to after leaving former Yugoslav nations. I'm going to introduce them now. Coming up first is Aleksandar Hemon, who's the author of Making of Zombie Wars, The Lazarus Project, which was a finalist for the National Book Award and the National Book Critics Circle Award. The Question of Bruno, Nowhere Man, Love and Obstacles, and a book of autobiographical essays called The Book of My Lives. He is publishing a book on the UN in December. He was born in Sarajevo, and he moved to Chicago in 1991, just prior to the war in Sarajevo, and stayed there, not by choice, learned English well enough to write it, although he already spoke it. By 1995, was publishing stories in English, and by 2000, he published his first book, The Question of Bruno. By 2004, he had won a MacArthur Genius Grant and spoke all 27 languages of the word hot dog in Chicago. Next is Igor Stiks. He's the award-winning author of the novels A Castle in Romania and The Judgment of Richard Richter, both of which will be published by Amazon Crossing in the fall. Unfortunately, they're not here, but his book, Nations and Citizens in Yugoslavia and the Post-Yugoslav States, which is the sexiest title I have ever read, is here, and when he speaks, you'll understand why that's sort of a joke. He is an illuminating essayist, and he currently is living in Edinburgh, teaching, and he is also the winner of the Chevalier des Arts and des Lettres from France. He was born in Sarajevo. Finally, I'm going to murder her name. She said, you can call me Jurassic or Giraffe. Dubravka Ugresic. All right. I have a speech impediment. I'm from California. She's the author of many critically acclaimed works, including The Museum of Unconditional Surrender, Baba Yaga Laid an Egg, Europe in Sepia, which is her most recent book, and a book called Karajuku Culture, which is a collection of essays which were a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle. She recently won the Neustadt Prize, which is often a precursor to the Nobel, tap wood, I didn't just jinx her. She was born in Croatia and lives now in Holland. Please join me in welcoming the panelists now. So I get a gauge from the audience. How many of you are from the former Yugoslavia?
Everyone.
All right.
We are married to people from
All right, so maybe we should conduct this in a different language. But just to begin, I thought, rather than go directly into your experiences, I thought maybe each of you, starting with Dubravka, if I was a man from Mars, which is pretty close to my description, and I was coming here, how would you explain what nationalism is?
Okay, so there are many definitions of nationalism, and my favorite one, and I'm the author of this one, is that nationalism is ideology of stupid. And it is really ideology of stupid because nationalistic package is sort of so small and manageable, you know. There is almost nothing there. It is enough to be a Croat or a Serb or whatever, and you are already eligible for that ideology. And then into that package you have little like goodies, presents, like a little bit of history, a little bit of symbols, a flag, a coat of arms, the monument in the capital of a small state, mostly man, this is the history of man, and some invented battles or non-invented battles and so on and so forth. So I realized that a long time ago, but recently, because my little niece, she came crying from the school, and she said, "Aunt, I got F grade because I didn't know how Krbavska bitka was led, Battle of Krbava was about, or where it was led, or how." So local people would understand this mistake, Krbavska and Krbavska, okay? And then she said, "I didn't know that," and I realized that she's learning history, which is not yours. I mean, it is man's history. And I said, Krbavska bitka was led because of properties, because any battle was led for properties. So, this is the shortest answer, ideology of stupid.
Igor, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just to improvise on this, I think it's the short answer could be it's a belief that just by being born into some kind of community, you already have certain certain qualities. It's already a quality just to be born. You can be evil, you can be ignorant, stupid, it's okay. But you've been born into a certain community, certain nation, and in itself it's already a value. And this is why nationalism is so powerful, and why we can't really never underestimate it enough. It's a very simplified idea, but it speaks to everyone, you know. And I think that this is why it's keep on coming. And although, you know, many smart people believed now 180 years ago, 200 years ago, that nations and nationalism is just a thing that will pass, just a historic thing. I mean, people are not so stupid to really believe in it. And the real struggles will be for, you know, emancipation and social equality. And this is why people will unite into worldwide brotherhood and sisterhood. But apparently they also underestimate nationalism a bit, and we can see today that we should definitely take it seriously.
Sasha, I'm going to turn to you, and probably for optimism here.
You know, it brings sunshine everywhere I go.
Can you speak about these ideas, the characterizations of nationalism in the context of the United Nations Charter, and what the idea of nationalism that they were parlaying post-war, and maybe where the disconnect is between these two characterizations and what the UN hoped was achievable through an organized group of nations?
Well, I mean, just to follow up on what Dubravka and Igor said, I think that an essential quality of nationalism is that it's contingent upon the belief in an essence, a national essence, which is you don't acquire with birth. It just shows up with you when you were born. If you're born into a nation, this essence is independent of individual qualities of people, and that in the nationalist narrative, some people can neglect or deny this essence by being I don't know, cosmopolitan or whatever. But a nation state provides a context in which this essence can be actualized and practiced, right? And it is this essence that is under attack from those others who come into our space for whatever reason, whether they're the nation right across the border, the neighboring nation, or they're just immigrants coming in and sort of defiling this essence and preventing us from actualizing our essence in our own cultural space, in our own language, in our own government, controlling our own borders and all that. And so this essence justifies the state, as it were, and it's assumed, it's axiomatic, it always exists, so that, and it's self-evident to all of those who believe in that. And this works, whatever the nation is, there's an American essence. And this works also not only in the right wing, but works all across the board. I remember a survey by the New York Times some years ago where it was about the interior life of Americans, right? And the first...
We have none.
Huh?
We don't have any.
Well, apart from that, the first question was, and this is why I don't have it perhaps, or we don't have it, is the first question was how important it is to you to be American. So the interior life was a location where being American was practiced. Right? The essence, even the liberal publication, you know, non-ethnically defined nation of America, there was an American essence that was actualized in this interiority and expressed in public space. And this is both the appeal of nationalism, because you are born into a system of privileges just by your, you know, ethnic makeup or national makeup, and you can claim it as yours without actually doing anything. Right? You can weep when people you've never seen in your life win the gold medal in the Olympics, right? Because somehow you share the essence they wanted for you. With the United Nations, I mean, this was after World War II, and so they would not have defined, you know, fascism as nationalism, but the continuity is clear. In fact, it's maybe a special case, or it's the exact same thing. So there was some need for transnational organization of the world, and to stop nationalism from flying off the handle as it did in World War II, or fascism. So conceptualization of the world as a common space where we all live regardless of national ethnic belonging became possible in the aftermath of World War II. And so to counter nationalism, the world was provided as an alternative. We can all, to some extent, go beyond our differences, our essential differences, and find a way toward common language and common concept. With all that, of course, there were 5 permanent members of the United Nations, the 5 most powerful, actually 4 most powerful nations in France in the world. You know, they had permanent seats on the Security Council, and the Security Council is the only body of the United Nations that has any kind of executive power, and so that executive power is controlled by the 4 most powerful nations in the world and France. But the other bodies of the United Nations, they have no executive power. It's this symbolic space where the world comes together to communicate, right? And it has a bad rap, for many reasons, some of them good. So that Saudi Arabia is controlling the Commission on Women's Rights, for instance. But in terms of conceptualizing the world as a common space where nations and members of that nation can work together toward the betterment of the whole thing, right? There's no alternative to that in some ways. There's no other space to conceptualize. When I was writing this book, it's a very long answer, I'll just finish here. This is the most boring 2 hours of my entire life, but I was at a session when they were writing a zero draft of a document that will be discussed in Rio for the 20th anniversary of the Rio conference in 1992, where the notion of climate change and global warming became global. And they were discussing every little word, right? There's finding common language, right? So that each word was followed by a parenthetical, by a parenthesis where New Zealand had this suggestion, and Group 77 had this suggestion, the United States had this suggestion. So this tedious work of finding the language that could please everyone, right? It's fantastically boring. And the end result is language that is flat. Nevertheless, the effort was to find a common language to go beyond those differences.
Well, obviously, what happens to some degree within conflict and war is when nationalism gets out of control, and one of the obvious ways that is patrolled is by just defining people's essence as not the essence. And I want to ask you a question, Dubravka, because it was 26 years ago that you came to this city as war was coming to, you left Zagreb, not believing that war was coming, spent a bewildering bit of time here, and then returned, and then became, among many other people, a kind of public enemy because of your non-essential Croatianness. And it was actually, ironically, the president of PEN Croatia, as you write about in Karaoke Culture, who designated you and 5 other women as witches?
Witches, yeah, that we...
And I wonder if you can talk about that period and some of the critiques against you, and what way that they were related to nationalism versus just sexism, or are they too braided together, nationalism, sexism, to differentiate?
That's absolutely... First of all, I want to say that I said that nationalism is ideology stupid.
I'm sorry, could you
but
put my
nationalism...
We're having a hard time hearing.
Oh.
None of you are really on
Like this?
Yes.
Yes, so... Sorry?
That microphone.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So, so also nationalism is extremely sweet. Otherwise, if it wouldn't be sweet, it wouldn't work. So why it is sweet? Because it is connected with awards. Awards. So if we read just science, then the whole world is nationalistic and is on sale exactly because of that. I was taking the taxi on my way here and I passed by European wax. You girls, you have heard about Brazilian wax, but you have never heard about European wax. So even that has its geographical, geopolitical, and value, which means you can sell it. You can sell it better, European wax, than, let's say, maybe Brazilian wax, okay? How it works, how does it work on a small terrain? Which are those states we are from, like Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bosnia, and so on. So first of all, you have to award people. You have to tell them that they are better, that Croats are better than Serbs, okay? And everybody anyway feels better than somebody else. So it's almost natural. Then this is not enough, but you have to award people for their Croatiousness or for their Serbiousness. And if you are close to the power, to that pyramid, small pyramid of power, then you will get more. So that's how people, it is all connected with money. I mean, it is not for free. Nationalism is sweet because you can get something for that. Over the night, I mean, truck drivers became millionaires, okay? Because they were awarded for their loyalty. Basically, nationalistic system is like a feudal system because the king awards his loyal knights for their service. And that's how it was in Croatia, because they were really called Croatian knights. And first Croatian President Tudjman introduced that, knights. Yeah? And then you also have to return, religion is extremely important. So we are better than Serbs because we are Catholics and they are Orthodox, okay? With introducing the power of Catholicism or any other religion, women too get their place. In that respect, communism was emancipatory for women. And I know, let's say I heard the story from Sarajevo about an old lady. She lights the candle for Tito every day because she thinks that Tito liberated her from hijab. And her granddaughter is wearing hijab or hijab, okay, today, after so many years. I think that such constellations, they are almost, I would say, natural, because I realized that the biggest fear, biggest human fear, is a fear of exclusion. And it starts from kindergarten, you know, and you want to be part of community. And either you are in or you are out. Either you are Croat or you are out. And that's how nationalism works. And about the role of the women, I mean, I can talk for hours about this. Okay, so with the women are back to their traditional role. If they are not back to their traditional role, if they open their mouth, if they criticize, as I did and as my fellow journalists and writers did, you are what? Then you are a witch. Who are witches? Witches make pacts with devil. Who is devil? Devil is a Serb, communist, whatever. I mean, there is the West or the, no, it's not the West. Then it's the Balkan, because we Croats, we are not Balkan, just other people are, and so on and so forth. And then you have a little shish kebab.
Yeah, these definitional rubrics change as nationalism rises. I lived with a Lebanese woman and was once in Venice, and a Lebanese street seller said, "Oh, we are the Phoenicians." And she thought, "I know exactly what kind of guy you are." Igor, I wonder if you could tell a bit about your personal history. You were born in Sarajevo and then moved to Croatia. How much of your migration in that case and then out of Croatia was because you or your parents, I assume, because you're a little bit younger than some of us, I assume younger than me. At what point were the signals even aware to you as a child?
Well, I was 15 years old when the war started in Bosnia, so I was quite aware of what was going on, and not only when the war broke out, but even before. Although we lived a bit like in a dream, we believed this could not happen to us. Even when we were seeing things happening in Croatia, we were believing something will prevent the war. And this is where we all come to a very traumatic experience for all of us, because it's not that just people did resist. Yeah, in Sarajevo there were the massive peace protests, and only a day before the war started, these people were protesting with a very clear narrative. They came with the portraits of Tito and with Yugoslav flags, so the country that was not there, the leader that was not there, with flags of socialist Bosnia, with miners came with their flags, and there was even one big banner saying, workers yes, warriors no. And that happened just before the outbreak of the war. And that was based, for some people who are maybe not familiar, they will say, oh, what these people were saying in '92, socialism was over, the Berlin Wall was down, so what they were actually talking about. But that was a narrative of brotherhood and unity, it was a narrative of togetherness, it was a narrative of we want to live together regardless of who we are. It was a narrative that had its roots in the anti-fascist struggle and what were the ideals behind socialist Yugoslavia. You only needed 2 sniper fires and that was it. And 2 dead women on that bridge, and it was over with that movement because another narrative won. And that narrative was, no, that was all lie. We all belong exclusively to our groups, and now we have to fight over the resources. And of course, don't you mention any socialism, that's over. The idea that people are going to be equal, it's over. Not only that they're not going to be equal, they will be divided. And then you have the territory, and people live on the same territory. So you see how that narrative was already anticipating all the victims and final genocide and so on that to happen. That narrative won. We just were at that point naive, but naive in a very noble way. But no nobility of that sort cannot help you when the guns are fired. It cannot help you when somebody is ready to use a massive violence to destroy the world that existed. And then it was just how to naturalize it, which was happening in the Western media. Suddenly people start talking that actually those were always the tribes that always fought each other. So what is happening is normal for them and abnormal for our new liberal post-Berlin Wall world in which everything gonna be fine and human rights will reign everywhere, apart in the Balkans. And then where we are right now, it's actually we thought that we were abnormal and that we're going to join this brave new world. And what happened once we stopped fighting and everything, that world will started to become more and more nationalistic, more and more to our image, rather than we changing towards towards something else. So I think we are now in a very curious position, even today, to talk about it, because we do have this experience, and unfortunately, it can't help. It can't help much. Once you have this experience of disaster and disintegration, you can warn other people that this is happening, but they have to figure out themselves maybe a better strategy of resistance than we had back then.
Yeah, Igor has a really terrific piece that was in The Guardian about 3 years ago, sort of about the events of 2014, saying, Europe, I hope you're listening, we are right now pointing the way towards your future, and I think at that point no one had really thought about sort of nationalism being on the rise at quite the level that it is right now. Sasha, one more question about the past and around the years of 1992. On the way here from Boston, you told me a story, about, and I'm wondering if you can repeat it on stage, about someone who basically was a drug dealer in Sarajevo at the time, right before you left. And the reason I think about it is Dubravka's characterization of nationalism as inherently sexist and a recalculating of the value of certain individuals, especially women, pushing them further down the scale. I was struck by the fact that the person you were speaking of became a kind of militia leader who was for multi-ethnic Sarajevo, and yet all of his symbiology was incredibly masculine, riding around on a white horse with a silver colt. And I wonder if that was, to some degree, characteristics of some of the resistance that was for keeping a multi-ethnic Bosnia and Sarajevo.
Well, I mean, first, Dubravka is obviously absolutely right that nationalism is always exceedingly and pathologically male and masculine. You can see it here right now, just the attack on women's rights and sort of the Viagratic masculinity of Trump, and it entirely fits the model that we are so familiar with, right? In nationalist discourse, women are merely producing new citizens or new members of the nation, warriors, right? And so they cannot have control over their bodies. Their bodies serve the nation, right? So they cannot control their bodies. And this goes all across the board. And Croatia was plain Catholicism, for instance, or Serbia, it was exactly the same thing and so on. But here it has some, it's not quite directly connected to a particular religion, but it is at play. And so in nationalist history, there are all these great men who did great things, and there, if there are women, there are mothers who lost 9 sons or something, but they're always mothers. They're never independent. They're always attached to a man, a male body of some kind, and so on. And so it is as present as air is present in this room. In any nationalist discourse, the strange thing about nationalism, it's not an international ideology. It doesn't seem so. There are no nationalist conferences. Right? There was a communist international, but there's no nationalist international. But you can see even now how the similarity, the kinship of Marine Le Pen and Putin and Trump and Erdogan, they're in the same club. They know what they're talking about. They can talk to each other in code. But the story is this. There was a guy before the war, a cop, he was a policeman, who's wanted to control a market in Sarajevo, Markale, right? Because if you control the market, then you can get bribes from people who sell stuff at the market. And he was fighting over it with some other policemen. This was well before the war. And in that fight, he paid a local thug, who was a teenager at the time, to burn the guy's car. And so he burned his car, and this cop got fired and started, in the process of transition, he started his own business of smuggling stuff. And so he made enough money that the first 3 elections in former Yugoslavia, including Bosnia, he gave a lot of money to the Bosniak Nationalist Party, SDA, and also to the Reformist Party, which was, presumably multi-ethnic, but a little less money. The guy who burned the car for him, whose nickname was Chelo. Chelo means baldy. That was my nickname in high school. Yes, that's he ended up in prison for rape. He raped the girlfriend of a guy who was in a punk band who testified against him. So anyway, Chelo went to prison, where he also was in prison with some people who would later become leaders of various nationalist parties in Bosnia and Sarajevo. But this guy, Alija Delimustovic, the former cop, he became the Minister of Interior in Bosnia, right? And we knew this. So he controlled the police, but also he was the chief smuggler of everything in Bosnia, including drugs. And suddenly the whole town was flooded with drugs in summer. And Chelo came out of prison as soon as he became Minister of Interior, this guy. And the guy who witnessed against him vanished. He was never seen again. I think he escaped and moved out of the country because he was going to, his life was cheap. Now this Chelo, there were several Chelos. It's a common nickname for a town in Sarajevo, so don't make any judgments about me. But this guy became one of the leaders of a local, militia. At the beginning of the siege, there was no army and there was very disorganized. And so some of these thugs had their own little gangs. They defended the city while also pilfering it. They would go and empty a store in the middle of the night. But this guy is different from other militias. There were a couple of Chelo. One of Chelo was really, really bad. I mean, he killed people of non-Muslim background randomly. This guy he had a multi-ethnic militia. And so he respected the multi-ethnic spirit of Sarajevo, but he was a thug and a criminal. But he also, and for that reason, he was relatively popular across the city. These more ethnically defined thugs, they liked in certain parts of the city, and people stayed away from him. So he was liked by people. And so this he reproduced, and he enjoyed this by showing up, bare chested with a big coat, and there are these pictures where he acts himself, and he reproduced this over masculine image of himself, and people liked him for that. But he was, and so there's a picture of him on a white horse in the middle of a fucking war, with a coat, like a knight. He was a special case, so there were other knights who were worse.
I have a story, if I can.
Yes, please, I love stories.
It's a footnote. It's a footnote to your story. And nobody believes me that it is true, but it is. Okay. So why nationalistic constellation is sweet? Because, in fact, many people, they became what they always wanted to be, but they didn't dare to say or admit or to realize their other self. So I had a publishing house before the war, and the name of that small publishing house in Croatia, in Zagreb, was August Tesanec. Director and the main editor of that house was an editor. And then with Tudjman and nationalism and Croatian state, he became suddenly a main chief of Croatian police. And it's not weird. It's okay. It's normal. Yeah. So he became a chief of police, and he liked to walk in the town with a revolver. People say. We were never close to, although he was the director of the publishing house, I almost didn't know him. And once I was in Zagreb, maybe it could be 1992 or 1983, and he spotted me on the street. And that was all. We even didn't say hello to each other. And that night, around midnight, somebody was knocking on my door. Somebody was knocking on my door, and it was his drunken voice. He was ordering me to open the door. He addressed me as Ugresic, like Ugresic, otvori vrata, open the door. So, and I found myself in the weirdest situation of all situations in the world. I mean, I couldn't call police because the drunken chief of Croatian police was knocking on my door. So probably this power, this gun, chief of police gave him this heroism and brevity to knock on the door of the writer he probably always hated.
Wow. I'm going to go to Igor at this point, but I'll return back to you because I would like to talk about nostalgia and exile, which is something I think you write about in this book. But Igor, in some of your work, you've written about the way that the aftermath of the breakup in Yugoslavia rewarded often some of the most nationalistic people, and so that the spoils of destruction wound up in the hands of people who were in some ways at the heart of the destruction. And I wonder if you can expand on that and talk about that in the context of a kind of rising combination of nationalism and capitalism in the former Yugoslavia.
Yeah, I'll briefly talk about that, and then I could also share some of my experiences from Scotland. Can I do that? Because this is becoming all too pathological, we are all crazy with all these stories, and it's all about former Yugoslavia, but actually it's quite curious in Scotland. But you know, in a way, I'll kind of give you an answer, because this is something I've been working on, and also in a way sort of part of the movements that are now questioning what was actually happened, and that nationalism that didn't come from the sky just because it's a good narrative. Yeah, it mobilizes people, but it was also related to capitalist restoration, which pretty much said you have to grab the resources, and politicians knew it very well. And the major resource was, I think, in the history of struggles, of worker struggles, Yugoslavia will also go down as a country where workers gave up, number one, on their state, where they were the sovereign, working class. They gave up on what we call social property, which means, you know, workers in Yugoslavia were owners of their factories and firms. Believe it or not, that was true. And they gave up on it, and they were sent to war to kill each other, and then they woke up after that nightmare realizing, well, they've been completely stripped of everything, completely poor, devastated by war and everything, and it was over. You know, you can't turn the clock back. And especially when they were coming back to their factories, there was already a new capitalist in town, of course connected with the power, who was owning everything. And then you got something that, of course, nobody talks about. It's not only that you have victims of the war, but you have victims of what we call transition to where, we don't know, where people are simply dying in mass because they don't have enough health care, and there's alcoholism, and there's just despair and apathy and so on. So the destruction...
Like America now.
Well, you will recognize things. So the destruction is massive. Yeah? And then people wake up, and now younger people waking up and discovering all these books published in the house that you mentioned, that was called August Cesares by Croatian revolutionary.
The name of that male swine and that Dubravka Ugresic.
I know. So this is again. But now, what happens to me? I was migrating a lot. So during the war, I lived in Zagreb. This is why I know all these references as well. And then I went to France to study, and then to Chicago for 3 years, and then to Edinburgh, Scotland. At the moment where things started to happen in a very curious way, you know, I was trying to say to people, well, this reminds me a bit of former Yugoslavia. And at first they were like, no way, no, of course not. Then I said, but yeah, but you know, you can't really agree on who is in charge. What about Scotland? Does it have autonomy? It doesn't have autonomy. What about London? Yeah, okay. And then he started to speak about, well, maybe independence. Then I said, well, you know, and then say, okay, but there won't be violence. It's whatever happens, there won't be violence. Well, let's go for it. There are various types of violence, of course, happening. And Scots, as being, of course, as they think of themselves, they invented everything. So, and they did invent a lot of things. The rest, we invented, actually. Nicola Tesla. And they also invented acceptable nationalism. So, how about this? So, what you heard here is the typical ethnic nationalism. It's us versus them. If you don't belong by blood, that's over. Masculine, patriarchal, and so on. Well, Scots now want to have, first they have female leader, our supreme leader, that we watch every word she says, and she's very charming. And also...
We have Colinda too.
Yeah, it's a different type of it. So
Nicola will lead our future nation. When I say our, because it's a civic nation. Scotland said, yeah, if you live in Scotland, you're Scottish. And we want people to come here. Unlike England, they want to stopping people. We want people to come from wherever you are, and we're going to accept you into our new nation. And it's not going to be as capitalistic as English, it's going to be social democratic as well. So you can't really catch them, you know. Say, well, but it's still nationalism. Well, but they invented the kind you might agree with up to a certain moment. And luckily they forgot about their lost battles, you know, because lost battles are absolutely brilliant, and their backburn battle and so on, and also they were cheated by the English in signing this union, and so there's all these narratives are there, but they figure out with these xenophobic, capitalistic Englishmen, they could actually pose as like avant-garde of a progressive, call it nationalism.
Sasha, I wonder if you can, in the context of what Igor just said, you say you believe in sort of city-state nationalism. You believe in Sarajevo. You believe you know, in spite of the winters and the hot dogs, you're completely dedicated to Chicago.
What's wrong with hot dogs? But that's not
But I wonder if you can contrast sort of, is city belonging an alternate form of acceptable nationalism, similar to what?
I read somewhere, and I can't remember the source, but the biggest city that voted for Trump in the United States was Oklahoma City. And Oklahoma is about 1 million people, I think a little less. And even Oklahoma City, the Trump voters were maybe 50-some%. The bigger cities, all across the board, New York, Chicago, LA, San Francisco, it's 75, 80, 85, 88. I think Chicago was 88, New York was 89% against Trump. And you will find in Europe that cities operate differently from the countryside. And this is interesting, you know, there's a concentration of wealth and educated people, but also the labor force brings people, the need for labor force brings people of all kinds of cities. But I think it's also an organizational, a conceptual thing. Because, you know, a nation, she died this year, what's his name, Benedict Anderson, he talked about nations and imagine community, right? That you have to imagine that somehow you have something in common with someone who lives in Arizona. I've never been in Arizona, I have no way what they live like, but somehow we belong to the same nation. We have to imagine that you know, 2 miles from the place where this imaginary compatriot lives, where it's Mexico, and they're entirely different, right? And I have equal knowledge about the person across the border and the person on this side of the border, but I imagine them as belonging to the same nation. And so to my mind, there's a point where nation becomes, or any kind of community, in fact, becomes entirely abstract, entirely imaginary, right? And so we start with family, which I don't have to imagine, and we see the circle of friends who I don't have to imagine, and then another, you know, circle of people who are related to people I know in my family, and sort of spreads. But the cutoff point for me is the size of the city, right? The city is, there are parts of the city of Chicago where I have to imagine because I haven't been there, but I've been to a lot of it, or Sarajevo. But there's a concreteness to it, and the concreteness of daily practices, the concreteness of lives of people. People have names and, you know, addresses, and they have histories, and so on, with whom you can interact directly, right? And so to me, I know that this is idealistic and naive. To me, an ideal human organization would be city republic, as in the Renaissance, right? That would govern by itself. And so, before the war in Sarajevo, I wrote a column, it was called Sarajevo Republika, Sarajevo Republic, the Republic of Sarajevo. Because I like to operate within that context. And to me, I'm in the process of divorcing from America. We'll share the custody of Chicago as of now. I hope I'm still negotiating. But to me, the problem with Chicago is that it's in America, but I would be perfectly happy to just live there. I have my people, we know who voted for Trump and where they live. And so we can take care of that.
Dubravka, your new book, Europe in Sepia, is based on travels within a kind of exhausted Europe, places just tired of being European. And I wonder if you have a similar feeling to Sasha about the cities within Europe. If traveling within them, you feel that they could exist entirely of themselves as sort of city republics and not be exhausted if they didn't have to carry also the banner of being European.
Yeah, it is that feeling. I have that feeling in New York, by the way. So, New York is a republic. I mean, and in some cities of Europe, the bigger they are, they provoke more that feeling you were talking about. So, but I mean, all things like nationalism are ruled by money and by profit. We are always forgetting that story because we think that nationalism is sort of disease, and it is, but it is induced by the people who want to suck out of that a profit, you know. It's a profitable thing. Fall of Yugoslavia was a market. I mean, it gave money to some people. That's why people got rich. I mean, the best story is, I have it, you know that you would know, in New York, there is a beautiful house on 5th Avenue facing Central Park. And it was always known as a Yugoslav mission. And it was 6th floor, beautiful, beautiful building. And when Yugoslavia really fell apart, I was in New York and many times after that, and I'm a good housewife. Windows on that building were always dirty. And then I was asking some people, like it is my property, what's going on with that house? Nobody knew the answer. Recently, I read the article, finally. Yeah, there were rumors that Jack Nicholson is going to buy the house, he is interested in this and that, but recently it is put on the market. It was bought in the 60s or 70s for $150,000. You can imagine now how much is. So, and they already did, how much of that supposed money goes to Croatia, to Slovenia, to Bosnia, to Serbia. Serbia gets, if you're interested in, I mean, or if you are worried, it gets 40% of the future. So this is the real end of Yugoslavia.
I want to end with you, Igor, because we're getting up to an hour now. I think a lot of you probably have questions for the panelists. In Dubravka's book, The Ministry of Pain, there's this passage which I just want to read. It's one paragraph, and its characters sitting around thinking, and it goes like this. Yugoslavia, the country where they'd been born, where they'd come from, no longer existed. They did their best to deal with it by steering clear of the name, shortening it to Yuga, as the Garstarbeiter, the migrant workers in Germany, had done before them, and thus the former Yugoslavia to the former Yuga, or playfully transforming it into Titoland or the Titanic. As for its inhabitants, they became Yugos, or more often simply our people. The possessive pronoun also came in handy when referring to the language they spoke together, none of them being Slovenian, Macedonian, or Albanian. To avoid its former, now politically correct name of Serbo-Croatian, they simply called it our language. Now, I wonder, Igor, if you could address this sort of, one thing that we haven't really talked about is nationalism and language. And within Europe now, English is sort of the lingua franca, but it's also very much the language of capital. And yet within Scotland and Ireland, there's very much a push to start using Scots or Gaelic. And I wonder if you see, with the breakdown of certain nationalism, a return to nationalistic languages, or if people are going to be happy to stay with, plain old English.
Well, that's a very good. It's very topical, and Dubravka and I, we signed something called Declaration of the Common Language, and I was I was participating with a number of writers and intellectuals and linguists in preparation of this declaration, which basically is trying to stop this nonsense. Of course, everybody knows here, everybody knows, I guess,
that people cannot fool you when they say that they speak Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, Montenegrin. That's not four, that's just one language. Although people put this on CV, it looks better. Just forget about it. So we said to these people, this is nice, but actually it is a common language and we share it. And we made this, I have to say, I've been participating in some more radical action. This was the least radical thing. It was like a liberal lemonade. Everyone can call it as they want, but to admit it is the same, and everyone can do this and that. It was the really benign text. Attack we got from all sides is like beyond belief, and it's still been going on. So basically, all nationalists from all sides mobilized to say there are these kind of 200, 300, and plus 8,000 people who signed it, these traitors, and people who don't understand the language is nation. And if there are 4 nations, then there are 4 languages. And no matter that we can understand each other, as we can see, Croatian president, Serbian prime minister, when they meet, there's no translator, so you wonder what's happening there. Regardless of that, regardless of what is objectively out there, we're gonna impose on you the idea that the language has to be fragmented and separate. And
they're all illiterate.
And so basically we are trying to speak to the future, I guess. Yeah. Although, as I said, this is very benign, very nice. Maybe one day we'll be vindicated. People say, look, these people saw it and made something. Or maybe we'll be just totally marginalized and will not exist, and they're going to continue with basically destroying the language. That for us is, of course, the essential tool of what we do, but it's also something wherever you can see how basically nationalism operates, and how people self-censor themselves, how they make attention what they're speaking. So the language is being also, it's not liberated, and this is what we advocate. If you advocate for that, then you are the enemy of what nation believes of itself. But I also have a very, very personal reason. Now I live in Belgrade with my wife, and we have a child, and I've been scholarized in so what today will be Bosnian standard and Croatian standard of the same language. Not many differences, but still. My wife is Serbian standard, again the common language. So this question: what our son is he bilingual? Is he? I mean,
He will speak BCS.
BCS, yeah, it will have us. Yeah, and this tells you that he will probably face all these questions over and over again. It's very tiring, but what can we do? This is the situation we found ourselves in. And we mentioned Yugoslavia as a country that doesn't exist. So, for instance, if you were to trace known origins of mine, you would need a country that does not exist already for 100 years, which is Austria-Hungary. And if you want to trace all origins of my son, you would need another country that doesn't exist, which is Yugoslavia. So when they ask you where you're from, for people it's the most simple question. For me, it's absolute torture. And you know, do you have 5 hours? I'll tell you where.
Well, I think at this point it would be great to have some questions from the audience. There are 2 mics, one on the left and one on the right. If you could just speak into the mic and address your question to someone.
Yes, I will speak into the microphone. Is it on?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lori Garrett. I have my grandmother's from Savtop, Bratovic, my grandfather from Dubrovnik, Fjorovic, but on my other side, Mackenzie Scottish and Garrett Irish. So I represent serious nationalist tribes. And what I want to ask you about, just one comment because of the last thing. My very good friend Richard Holbrook would have loved this conversation. And one of the things he would have said to you was, the Dayton peace talks were in just 2 languages, English and whatever you want to call that other one, Serbo-Croatian, blah, 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 blah. Anyway, my question is how do you separate tribalism from nationalism? Because I don't think America and Trump are nationalist. Donald Trump is for white tribe within the nation. He is not for African Americans. He is not for Chicanos. He is not for, make a huge list. So how do you separate tribalism, and how is that different from the nationalism you're talking about?
It's a great question.
Well, I mean, it's a question of terminology. I think that the basic definition of nationalism is that it requires some kind of essence, and the essence could be defined ethnically, it could be defined racially, it could be defined tribally. And so those are variations of the same process. What Trumpism is claiming is that there's this particular American essence. It is not quite said openly. They don't say it's white, but they do everything around it as though it is white. And so we can read it easily. That essentialism is the primary and the essential symptom of nationalism. And that essence gives the right to the people who contain that essence over others, right? And all those others, their values measured as to how close to the essence might they be, or rather how distant from that essence they might be. And that essence is always, such an essence is always defined in opposition to something else, right? They pretend it's self-evident, but it always needs an oppositional concept, right? It is defined by what it is not, and which is why attacking the people defined as others is essential, to abuse the pun further, is essential to defining our identity. And this attacking of the other can go from, rhetorical insults, which is what Trump and his people do, to war, right? But it's always aggressive. Nationalism can never exist without that other, because it cannot be defined. It cannot understand itself unless it sees the other as the category that has everything exactly different from us. Right? And this is the pathology of nationalism, because it's the same ideological move. They're not separate moves. To define white nationalism, you have to practice racism, right? To be a Croat, you have to hate a Serb too, and to show why they're so hateful, or the other way around too.
Yeah, but also there is something I'm observing, because at the beginning, let's say, my example is mostly Croatia. I know the best. So with this Catholic religion, with this 25 years of preaching about nationalism, growth, you have to have some content. Otherwise, I mean, we don't know what we are talking about. So at this very point, nationalism in Croatia is so close to tribalism. And I will tell you, in connection with heavy Catholicism, and you can observe that in everyday life. For instance, if you go to the bus station, main bus station in Zagreb, you will see that on those booths, newspaper booths, you can't find much. You can find trinkets and souvenirs, crosses, and like it is a filiale, like it is of Catholic Church, all Catholic little, totems, idols. If you go to hospital in Zagreb, you will be welcomed with a Catholic cross on the entrance. If you want to see a doctor on that booth where, where they do administration, you will, and even nurses, you will find a lot of little pictures of Catholic saints. So, or whenever you go to post office, and in Zagreb, and you will find a little cans where you can put money for the saints, or you will find all that literature. So it looks like a tribal thing. The craziest thing of all was last year when in Italy there was a little priest. I mean, he was 135 centimeters. So, and he was a cross. His name is Leopold Mandic. And he was educated in Italy, in Padua, and as he was stuttering, so he couldn't serve as a priest, but he was very good at confessions. And then when he died, the miraculous thing was that that little body did not dissolve for quite a frightening time. So they simply proclaimed him as Saint Leopold Mandic, okay? So that Leopold Mandic came like in a glass, yes, case, coffin, in a glass coffin, with a beard which touched his fingers. He was lying in that coffin, and the whole Croatia, 5 days, prime time, TV, there were reports about dozens and dozens and hundreds of people who wanted to see their saint, Saint Leopold Mandic, okay? So for me, it was like I'm in Philippines, or I don't know where. I mean, like I'm in Croatia, in fact.
Yeah, but this is a very, very good illustration of what tribalism is, because actually this saint, Leo, worked a lot. He worked a lot on a reconciliation between the Orthodox and the Catholic Church. Yes. And he comes from a mixed Orthodox Catholic. And the Pope, current Pope, sent him to Croatia with the message. And the message was, of course, completely omitted and deleted that there is something in reconciliation. So so Catholic Church should be universal, but actually they call it in Croatia Church of Croats. So it's very national church within, and they completely ignore the current Pope. He's like, for them, he's a Marxist, he's a communist, he's like a devil. Yeah. So that's of course quite interesting, but thanks for asking this, because again, this is not something invented in the Balkans. Famous Dreyfus affair in France, when Zola said J'accuse, was about whether we are a nation or we are tribe. And some people already there were corrupting the idea of universal emancipatory French nation by saying, no, Jews are not part of this nation. Yeah? And that's the beginning of tribalism. You have it with Le Pen. Today, Muslims are not part of the nation. And this is maybe what we are seeing here. This is why the president does not speak to everyone, but actually only to those who are entitled to be to lead the nation. And it works in a funny way. Again getting some other examples from a civilized world, so to speak. It's like how Nazism happened and so on. I mean, what we got were the consequences, but how it happened in 1933, not everyone voted for Hitler, as you know. He got 30%, but 30% of Germans voted communists. So this was not so clear. But there was something, apart from the rubbish of Übermensch and so on, that they promised to every German. Again, regardless of who you are, you've been born German, working on a farm, uneducated. Careers. Their careers are waiting for you. We're gonna run the world. We're gonna capture Ukraine, Russia. You're all gonna become bosses and having beautiful careers and money and so on. That's what played with the imagination of this Nazi.
That is exactly what Kolinda Grabar-Kitarović promises Croats when she visits them in Scotland, in Sweden, come back to Croatia, you will all get careers.
So you see, it always operates a bit with something. You have to, as we said, you have to offer something, not only nice story. Something.
Yeah, it reminds me of the common political parlance within the last election was we're going to take back the country.
Right.
Just you think about it, it's kind of scary language. There's a question over here.
Yeah, it's actually for Dubravka, although of course other members of the panel can answer the question. I think what I find really sad is, I was in my early 20s during the disintegration of Yugoslavia and the rise of ethnic nationalism in Croatia. And you've written extensively about the destigmatization of the Ustaša past, which still plagues Croatian politics today. And so as a feminist writer, and the only reason I highlight that is because I think that it's important to recognize the role of feminists throughout the former Yugoslavia in challenging ethnic nationalism. What is it going to take to finally challenge the politics of memory, which, you know, idealizes, you know, a horrific past, this continued flirtation with fascism? Because I just, you know, as a middle-aged woman, I'm like, when is it going to finally end?
Yeah, it ended, but nobody noticed, with the swastika in football stadium in Split. It is a king size swastika, but somehow it was interpreted as an incident. And you have those incidents popping out like popcorn every day, everywhere, in every corner. Because this is so-called software now, what we are talking about. You have historians, you have Croatian intelligentsia and Serbian intelligentsia as well. They want to rewrite the whole history. They do fabrications. They want to turn, destigmatize Nazi past of Croatia. They want to make it positive. They are resurrecting heroes from that period. They already resurrected a lot. They resurrected the money. Name of the money is kuna, as it was during the little Nazi puppet state of Croatia during the Second World War. They resurrected cord of symbols, flags, coat of arms. They resurrected names. Like, for instance, nobody counted, but probably there are at least 50 streets or institutions named after Mile Budak, who was Minister for Racial Affairs.
Our fellow writer.
Our fellow writer too, and so on and so forth. So it is unstoppable, because somebody also counted recently in only Croatian oppositional newspaper, apparently sort of Serbian or what, Novosti, where somebody counted media. This is interesting story, that I think that 1% are on the left side and the rest is on the heavy right side, you know. And it is not today. I mean, this process, nobody understands that the process is going on for 25 years. And now it is there. It penetrated everywhere. It penetrated into kindergartens, it penetrated into schools, high schools, universities, media, everywhere. And this is frightening, because I'm afraid for my little niece, for kids. I check their school books. I see what is written in those school books. I'm not talking about mathematics. Thank God, mathematics does not belong to one nation. But I'm talking about history, about language, about literature, so-called humanistic. So this is, and then you already, I wrote about that, and this is true. When my nephew was 10 years old, so he asked me to, because they got in the school, they got CDs with video games, and like educational video games, geography, language, this and that. And then he said, "Aunt, would you like to go to school with me?" And we did. And what would you choose? And I said, okay, geography. Okay. And then the video game was that you had the map of Croatia, okay, and then a little satellite, and then you would navigate that satellite into the towns and places of Croatia, and if you do right, then the name of the town would pop up. So he asked, where would you like to go? And I said, let us go to Dubrovnik. And then he rightly popped with little satellite on Dubrovnik. And there it was immediately few words about the history of Dubrovnik. And I was delighted. I said, how nice game. But then, after that, the next second, what popped out was the face of Dubravka Šuica, then the mayor of Dubrovnik, a member of HDZ, this rigid rightist party, and so on and so forth. And they said, close it. Let us go to Osijek. We went to Osijek. Whoop, a little history of Osijek. And then the ugly face of Osijek mafioso and politician as a mayor and so on. So it's, I wrote an essay in 1992 and I'm rewriting it constantly, it grows. And now the title is an essay to begin, but it never arrives because it doesn't stop.
I think we have time for one or two more questions.
Thank you. So quoting the video from the beginning, thank you for your words. I was wondering if you can comment a little bit about the tension between the name of the panel, which is too nationalistic, and the profile of the audience, which is nationalistic. And if you feel sometimes like an artist nationalized. Because I've been in a Goran Bregovic concert a few months ago, everyone spoke to my own experience hearing Serbo-Croatian, who knows if it is Bosnian and Serbian. Or I've been yesterday to this Argentinian on the Edge conversation, and everyone was from Argentina. And actually, Mariana Enrique, an Argentinian artist, says, I feel comfortable being Argentinian and writing for my people. So I was wondering about how do you feel with in this relationship with your audience?
With the others.
With your audience. Yeah, this audience or any audience you can find in your conversations on interviews.
I think the audience is fine. They laugh at the right jokes. You know? this is how we vet them. They don't laugh. They're spies.
We gave everybody.
That's right. It's everyone's family here. We pay, like pay demonstrators that protest against Trump. But I think it's an interesting question because if the question is how do you define a nation, or how do you define your nation administratively, right? Who do you belong to other than a city? And so, in America it's easy to see that you can be American, it's not an ethnic origin. You can be American and then you can hyphenate your ethnicity or at least the country of origin. But in Europe, it's 1-to-1 ratio, right? If you're French, then you're French, right? If you're German, you're Croatian, you're Croatian. And the nationalisms of Europe, they do not allow for hyphenation, right? Even though there's a hard right, of course, will not allow that, but even you can go all the way to the left, which is a really suspicious idea of in France, you have French religion, Francophone religion, so that people of North African origin who have born in France and live in France and write in French, they're Francophone, because the French are French, right? And so, in other words, if you want to participate in some community larger than a city or a neighborhood, right, and if you want to be a citizen, then the question is how you define your citizenship. And nationalism is defined by your ethnic origin. You don't have to do anything about it. It's not a question of your choice. You're just born into it, and therefore you don't do anything about it, right? You just vote for the national parties every once in a while, and they'll take care of the nation. This is what their implied or explicit mandate is, right? You don't have to participate. But to be a citizen, and Yugoslavia allowed for that conceptually, right? My mother to this day, and she lives in Canada, she's Yugoslav. Her ethnic background has nothing to do with that, because she participated in that civic community. It was misguided, it was complicated, it was stupid in some ways, but she could define herself around with that civic identity. They had a common project. She made a choice to take part in the common project, and she was defined by her belonging to that common project. She did not get born into it. She was born before World War II in Bosnia, and then lived her life as Yugoslavia. Once Yugoslavia fell apart, she now claims she has no identity. She has no identity because she has no common project to take part. One thing about nationalism is there's no common project other than the nation. This is why it's possible to strip the country of all its value, right? Because the project is nation. As long as we have the nation, we're good. All those other things are incidental. So, of course, I cannot tell what the ethnic background of anyone in the audience is, but it's a kind of a practice community. I assume that, and well, not assume because everyone raised their hands, they're somewhere from former Yugoslavia. But because we are here talking about nationalism, which we deplore, that means that the implication is that there's some kind of consensus that there's a value in this kind of civic identity, that this is what we want to practice. That's the opposite of nationalism. The opposite of Croatian nationalism is not Serbian nationalism. The opposite of Serbian and Croatian nationalism is this belief in civic, chosen citizenship, right, where you choose to do these things.
I know you have a question, but I think we've got to give up the room. How much time do we have?
3 minutes.
3 minutes. So, 20-second question, speed round.
I had a big question, like what are their alternatives? But we can't answer that. But so just perhaps very quickly then, I'm intrigued by this suggestion of cities perhaps as an alternative. And the thing that came to mind when I thought of that was, but cities themselves are bastions, as we all well know, of massive inequality. And perhaps would this be a vehicle for just another way to mask that inequality? Like, so I love New York. It doesn't matter that I have to commute from Bronx to get to work in Manhattan to serve, the wealthy 1%. But at least I'm a New Yorker and I'm a part of New York. So I'll just keep that to that. Keep my question to that. Is that perhaps an alternative?
Thank you, because you are now giving me an opportunity to say something about that as well. And of course, there's nothing I have to invent. I go back to Lenin, and I would like Zizek say, and in this I totally agree with him. It's who wrote before the revolution, there is no nation. This is a completely invented thing. There's at least 2 cultures in every state. Cultures of the tiny minority of the oppressors and the culture of the oppressed, which is a huge majority. And in every country like that. So therefore what you are saying exactly resonates with this. Any project has to speak to the oppressed and not just to recalibrate things, because this is the city of the major inequality. This is the global capital of absolute inequality. And if you don't deal with that, you'll never win over Trump, you'll never win over Marine Le Pen or whoever will be next day, you'll never win over fascism, as you said, and you will never manage to imagine the alternative. Because the alternative is not like our values against your horrible values. It's like the society you're gonna fight for and that people are gonna recognize themselves. And then in that society, this minority of the oppressors will give them a chance, once of course we tax them and nationalize their wealth and distribute to people, that to become normal people like everybody else, I have this dream for the kingdom of England, once when it be a republic, we will find a job. Or it will be a bit difficult with Prince Charles. I'm not sure what to do, but some other members, Harry could go to the army, William, there will be jobs. There will be like anybody else, Of course, they're not going to accept our modest proposition without fighting it. So this is how it happened in the world history. Those are nice ideas and nice words, but then you have to fight for it, and then it's quite different.
But this idea of normality was offered at the very beginning of the war in Yugoslavia, when you probably know that, when there was a slogan graffiti on a post office where it said, "This is Serbia," and somebody added, "This is post office."
This is post office to food. It's a full quote. Ovo je prošlo budalo.
Oh, thank you for ending us there. It's been a huge pleasure talking to you, Igor Stiks.
You can just call it
And
Conrad.
I'm sorry to have moved you to Edinburgh. I was working from an old bio, Dubravka
Jurassic.
and Aleksandar Hemon. You've been fantastic. The best place that they live is in their books. All of them are out there with copies of Freeman's, which Sasha has contributed to, a wonderful essay about his family, another essay about singing Ukrainian folk songs, which he will do if you feed him afterwards. You've been a great audience, Lori, and I don't know your name, but your question was excellent, and the other questions. Stick around and have a chat with the authors.